All right, and we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ground floor. I'm here with my close personal friend, Kwena Moloto.
Hello,
Yes,
everyone.
that's the part where you.
I didn't know that was the intro. Yes, hello, everyone.
Well, the intro will roll before this. I'll record that separately,
Okay,
and then we'll
okay.
have. Yeah,
Shit,
so
awkward
this is the
start. At
intro.
least this is a good icebreaker, Now can only get better from here.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so Kwena is the former president of the SRC. He was actually the president of the SRC when I came to the University of Pretoria for the first time, and that means that you were the first official figure to greet me. I was sitting in that massive hall with tens of thousands of other people listening to you speak, which I'm sure must have been a nerve-wracking moment.
Yeah, no, it was intense. And I don't know if you saw, but I was still writing my speech when I got on stage. The VC had a fit at the time. They wanted my speech beforehand, and I said, "Look, I don't want to lie to y'all. Um, I haven't written it yet."
Why have you
And
not
so,
written it yet?
no, I like off the cuff things. I think it's just generally how I operate in life. I don't plan too far ahead. I like to read a room, read situations, and so yeah, it didn't change even when I was up on a stage speaking to 10,000 first years.
I see. Well, I mean, you didn't do too bad of a job
Yeah.
because I decided to stay. To stay. So yeah, no, but it was a good time. So Kwena was president of the SRC and then graduated and is now working with a DA, which is exciting as well. You were a DA candidate also, like a DA. I almost want to say sponsored, like you were the DA rep when you ran.
Yeah, so I was chairperson of the DA student organization on campus from about 2015, and then in 2016 I was part of the mayoral campaign team when the DA won the city of Tshwane. Uh, Continued to be chair and then contested for SRC president, obviously under the banner of DA student organization in 2017, and I mean that was the first year I feel like my claim to fame, that we won all 10 seats inside the SRC election that year. And yeah, then I actually was very blessed. About 3 weeks after winning the SRC, I then got sworn in as a member of the municipal council in the city of Tshwane. And so it was 2017, 2018. It was a insane year, a busy year, but an enjoyable one.
I see. So, so I have to ask you like a pretty difficult question right from the start because I mean a lot of people listening will have different political views. Why the DA?
I think for me, I grew up inside an ANC household. My dad was very big in the ANC. Many of my family members were very big in the ANC, and so I mean, I grew up inside that party, and for that very reason, I didn't feel comfortable staying in it. And I mean, at the time, I think the DA's message really spoke to me. The message of unity, non-racialism, and I also think for me when it comes to service delivery, that was the biggest thing for me. I come from a family where we've got 31 cousins on my dad's side, and a lot of people that inside my family still haven't tasted the fruits of the new South Africa, haven't been empowered, and looking at the Western Cape, looking at the city of Cape Town, I always just felt like the DA knows how to provide service delivery, and for me that's how we restore the dignity to the millions of South Africans that really that haven't experienced the fruits of our new democracy.
I see. So I mean, before we started recording, we were chatting about the U.S. election, which I mean, as of right now, is on its second day. We're supposed to find out who's going to be the U.S. president within the next couple of hours after recording this. So, what Kwena, you said to me that I asked you if you're a Biden man, and you said to me you're not a Biden man, but you're an anti-Trump man.
That's correct.
So you support the Democrats because you don't like the Republicans. Is that sort of what happened with your South African political affiliation as well, where you started out not liking the DA because they're the DA, but you started out liking the DA because you didn't like what you were seeing with the ANC.
No, it was never that I didn't like the DA. I was an ANC supporter. I would, sing Zuma songs, but it's because that's what I grew up knowing. And when I got to university, I was just exposed to a lot more, and being exposed to a lot more. It's not that I had negative views of the DA. It was just that the DA was never really even within my mind. I was within the ANC, and so yeah. For me, it wasn't so much that the DA was anti-ANC. For me, it really was the non-racialism and the unity that was being spoken about at the time. Because for me, I mean, that's my dream. I've grown up, biracial. My dad's black, mom's white, and so I've seen the divisions inside our country, from primary school. I was always faced with that question of where do I fit in? People wanting to put me in boxes instead of just, us coming together as people, as South Africans, and so for me that's really what spoke to me, especially given my life experience as a mixed race person in this country.
I understand. So you've now you're working for the DA full time. What is your position title? I saw it somewhere. I think I saw it on LinkedIn or something. It's PR. Would you finish the sentence?
PR counselor, yeah.
PR counselor for Tshwane.
For Tshwane.
Okay, so what does that look like? What do you do in your day-to-day life? That what does your job entail?
So there's two types of councillors inside municipality. There's ward councillors, there's PR councillors. So ward councillors deal with a specific, ward. PR councillors are just assigned seats based on the percentage vote that a party received in an election, and then they get deployed in whatever way the party sees fit. So given my experience inside institutions of higher learning, being SRC President at the University of Pretoria, I'm also the National Chairperson of the DA student organization nationally, and so they felt that I would best be deployed at institutions of higher learning. And so for me, day to day, it's visiting institutions and figuring out where the city of Tshwane and institutions can work together to better the lives of students. In 2018, I mean, the biggest thing for me has always been student accommodation. And my time in the SRC, it's painful, when you see how many students sleep in toilets, sleep in the library, squatting. And for me, a biggest issue where I saw a possibility for the city to actually make a difference for students was to provide accommodation. And so in 2018, we managed to pass a resolution that the city has a lot of just dilapidated buildings and buildings that are just unoccupied, and those have been handed over to institutions of higher learning in order to turn into student accommodation. And so it's things like that. That was for me the biggest one, and since then the focus has also been food security. How can the city get involved in ensuring that students don't go hungry, because that's also a huge issue in this country. And I mean, the reason I think I got into council is that I said that, look, generally students are a national government issue, but because the city of Tshwane has such a large student population, I said that I feel that it is the city's obligation to find a way to better the lives of students, and so that's how I got there, and that's what I do, and that's the fight I've been trying to fight.
Okay, I see. So I was chatting to David 2 weeks ago, and one of the topics that one of the tangents we went on was talking about how difficult it is to be the SRC president, because there's a lot of good stuff that comes with it, but it is mostly responsibility. And David made a joke where he said that he thinks he's the only SRC president in history who didn't go through a suicidal phase during his term. So I mean, I spoke to David, and he was talking to me a little bit about student suicides, about hunger, and food parcels and that sort of stuff, and then raise issues. So, chat to me a little bit about your time as SRC president, and I'll ask you a similar question, which is, how do you handle that? Like, how did you handle that? Do you think you handled it well? And oh, seeing this smile. So yeah, chat to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a tough one. The pressure that office puts on you, I think, is not something that you're ever prepared for. Um, and I really think it's a question of the type of leader you are. Students can approach you and you can say there's nothing I can do, or you can put in the effort to try and assist students. But the reality is that students generally approach the SRC when they've exhausted every other avenue. They've gone to faculties, they've tried the executive, they've tried their house parents, and so the issues that the SRC are brought by students are always the most difficult ones to solve. So that's the one aspect, and that does take a toll on you, because it means that your success rate generally isn't high. Help desk for me, I think, when I was in the SRC was probably the most challenging experience of my life. The president had just announced free higher education. There were a lot of misconceptions and confusion about that, and so we had a huge influx of students thinking that the president's announcement meant that they could come and study at the University of Pretoria, often without even applying the year before. And it was tough. People would come with their families. Grandmothers would be crying in front of you, saying, "Please, like this is how, this is the only way that our family will ever have a better life." And it's tough to have to say no to that, or to have to try and fail. And so yeah, it was a a hectic time. I went through quite a bad depression in probably September, October of my term, where the pressure just became too much. It was also around the time of the GBV protests. We had to deal with a lot of cases over the course of our term, and I mean, I'm not a therapist, and people come, they plead their case, and in doing so, they have to explain what's going on in their lives, and to hear some of those stories, can have a major impact on your psyche. I think they always used to joke, there was a bar there by the square called Yammy's. They called it the SRC offices for a while because we were always all there, So, I mean, we dealt with our issues via alcohol. I'd neve had alcohol in my life until I got into the SRC, and then I became like flat out an alcoholic, It was hectic, but I've since stopped, drinking.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was just that SRC term, But we really fought inside our year, for increased student support in general, but also specifically for the SRC. David's not wrong, It's the one thing that every president is told by the previous president is watch your mental health, because the pressure is insane, The responsibility is insane, and yeah, I mean, you're often attacked, which can be rough, and you really do try. I mean, I don't know an SRC president that hasn't given it their all, but the reality is that you fail a lot, and students then point fingers at you, and it's difficult to keep that that armor on, and so yeah, no, he's not, he wasn't wrong in that analysis. I don't know how he managed to stay so happy over this time. It always amazes me. When he came in, I said, "Hey, call me if you ever need anything." But he's only called me for social visits.
I see.
But yeah, no, it's tough. It is very, very tough taking on that much responsibility and really holding the lives of students in your hands.
Okay, so you said earlier that the year that you were there, you said all 10 seats were won by the DA. Does that mean that there was no other political representation at the office?
So remember, when students vote, they vote for 10 portfolios. But then there's a deputy president and a deputy secretary. Those two positions are second place. And so obviously we couldn't field two candidates inside those positions. And so those fell then to the EFF. But of the contestable positions, we won all
So
10.
they both fell to the EFF, and this was in 2017.
Yeah.
Okay, it's interesting. Was there were ANC candidates as well?
Yes.
It's interesting to me that the EFF appeals so well to the youth. Why do you think that is?
They're exciting, you know. That's the honest truth, you know. And I think that they, in many ways, have made politics relevant again. I mean, in all honesty, before the formation of the EFF, how many people were Googling what's going on in Parliament, you know? And then suddenly we saw Julius chanting, "Pay back the money," you know? There's something exciting about that, you know? And I think that in that way they have managed to draw in young people's votes, and just generally young people do tend to lean more to the far left or more to the far right, you know. We are more extreme inside our views, and the EFF is very
Very
extreme
extremist,
inside
yes.
their views. And
No, definitely.
so I think that is probably the reason that they've managed to capture the youth vote in such a major way.
Okay, so how do you, as someone who's working at the DA and traveling from place to place, you look at the EFF, you see the EFF that despite the fact that they've got a much smaller percent of the national vote, they definitely do have a proportionately larger percent of the youth vote. And obviously, as you've said, capturing the youth vote is part of your job. So how do you travel from institution to institution knowing that you are coming up against a party which has a fantastic ability to excite the youth and still make a difference? How do you fight that?
It's rough, you know. I'll never forget. There was a time I went to campaign at University of Venda, and I was going there as the speaker for DASO, you know, and they brought Ndlozi for the EFF student command. You know, I think that I spoke to about 15, 20 people. He spoke to about 1,000, you know, and yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, I think that that's across the world right now. I mean, it's not just inside student politics, an issue that the center is dealing with, you know. I've always been very centrist in my views. I've never believed, you know, in the far left or the far right, because it's an exciting message, but it's a simple message as well. And the reality is that the issues that we face in our institutions, that we face in our country, aren't simple, you know. And
they're very nuanced, complex issues.
Exactly. And so if you're not going to tackle those issues inside in a complex way, we're not going to deal with them, you know. And so it's difficult, you know, and I think it requires more time, you know. When we talk to students, when we campaign, we generally need to sit with a student for 20-30 minutes, you know, because there are a lot of questions that they want to know about the organization, the perceptions of the organization, versus an EFF where, you know, you can go there and say, "Hey guys, we want the land back," you know, and that's an exciting thought, you know. That's a very exciting thought. I don't personally have any ambitions of farming, but you know, I mean, I think when you speak about the land, it's more talking about economic equality. It's just a nice way to package it, you know. And so yeah, no, it's tough, and I think that as I said, it's the issue that centrist structures, political structures across the globe are struggling with, is how when you live in a world of Twitter where it's 160 characters, how do you how do you um, how do you speak about complex issues, so yeah, I think we're still figuring it out.
So, I mean, you've got a fantastic perspective because not only are you a person who, as you've said, comes from a mixed race household, but also a person who has, such an investment into politics and the politics in our country, the way the different parties work, and so on. As someone with all that background, what is your opinion on the land issue? Do you think that the land needs to be seized and redistributed, or do you think it needs to be left alone? And how do your views match up with the DA's views necessarily?
No, they definitely do. I mean, for me, first and foremost, individual property rights are extremely important. I think that even when you just speak about international investments, and that's reality. We live in a globalized society. That this notion of expropriation without compensation, we've seen time and time again that it's failed. For me, I think the conversation about the lands, as I said, for me, it's more a proxy for a conversation about the inequality that exists in our country, and that's a conversation that I think we do need to be having, and it's a narrative that I would agree with. I've always said, and maybe it's a bit more left, but the fact that you have Santon and just across the highway you have Alex is just completely unacceptable. My mom does social development work, and so I spent a lot of time in Alex growing up, and I mean I'd be there around sewage and mud and shacks, but I could see the Michelangelo, and to me it's just it's disturbing, and it's also not sustainable. I mean there's only so long that people living in such conditions, and there's a large percentage of our population that lives in such conditions, doesn't say, hey, let's just cross the highway and and take what's ours. So yeah, but I mean, then coming back to the land issue, I mean, then it's more of a technical thing. For me, I believe that there does need to be redistribution of land. I think government has a lot of land, but to me, it's giving it back to the individual. You see so many people that, for example, can't take out a loan because they have no asset to their name. Give people title deeds. That you have an asset that's yours, that you can go to a bank, that you can get a loan to build a house, to invest in a business, to invest in your child's education. So for me, it's not a question of should land be redistributed. That for me is a definite, but the question is how. And I mean, with the EFF's policy, when they speak about expropriation without compensation, if you read their policies, they don't speak really about redistribution. That land would then belong to the government, and then people could lease the land, but they would completely abolish land ownership. And for me, I don't know, actually, I do know that I don't agree with with that policy.
I see. So, okay, so I agree with you to a large extent on a lot of the topics we're discussing, and I think that okay, so I've obviously this is now the third episode of this podcast. From the previous two episodes, I get some really nice stats, and I can go and I can see the breakdown of where people are listening to the podcast from, and it's diverse. There are some people listening in from Soweto. There's other people listening in from rural Limpopo, and then there are people listening in from the nice suburbs around Johannesburg, from Sandton, and so on. So to a child or a teenager or someone who's in their early 20s who is living in Alexandra, has grown up in Alexandra, and can see, like you said, the Michelangelo Hotel from their shack. What do you, as a DA representative, say to that person to tell them, we will make it better for you?
It's as I said in the beginning. For me, when you talk about the conditions that people are living in, it speaks to service delivery. I sometimes enjoy the more ideological conversations, but for me, I've always maintained that that's a privilege of mine. It's easy for me to have ideological conversations from this very nice apartment of mine in Hatfield. But for the average South African, the reality is that they don't have access to basic service delivery. And for me, the reality is that you see it inside Midvaal, which for a long time was the only DA-run municipality in Gauteng. You see in the city of Cape Town that the DA has a better history of service delivery. Not a perfect one, and that's not something that I'll ever pretend. Cape Town isn't perfect, but South Africa also isn't perfect. The reality is, with the huge amounts of inequality that we face, that it's going to take a very long time for us to get to a point where everyone has equal access to opportunities. But for me, it would always be to say that the DA has a track record of delivering. There's this narrative that the DA is, this white middle class party, but it's not true, and for me, it really would be, to say that there's hope inside the DA, and that really is my belief.
Okay, I understand. I find your views very interesting in this regard. And they've been formed. I especially like the fact that you grew up differently from how you feel now. And I think that we're living in a world where there's a lot of polarization happening all across the world. The best example that we can look at right now is the US election. It's shocking to me to see that people can hate one another fully and totally based on whether you are supporting the Republicans or the Democrats. I think it's beyond ridiculous that someone's political affiliation can create so much divide. We've been seeing it in the US for months. Even before the election really became a topic, we were looking at Black Lives Matter, and then we were looking at All Lives Matter, and these two movements that clashed. And before that, the US is probably one of the most divided countries in the world at this stage, just in the sense of, you hate the other side so much that you want to disagree with them on everything, regardless of whether the two sides really do have things in common. And I'm sure that as polarized as the situation in South Africa is as well, I think that parties like the DA, the EFF, and the ANC, I think, have a lot in common with regards to their ideals. So, if I'm assuming that you have a lot of friends who are, who vote for different political parties and so on. Why do you think that here in South Africa we can still tolerate and be friends with one another despite vastly different, political ideas, whereas in a country like the US, they hate one another so intensely? We as a country come from a history of divide, but somehow we can manage to still put our political affiliations aside. And then the USA is meant to be this first world country. Why do you think that is?
Sure. Well, first, I think that that aspect of I think it exists inside South Africa as well. At UP not so much, but if you go to TUT, we've had our members that have been stabbed for wearing a blue shirt. Members that have had their rooms ransacked and their property taken because of their blue shirt. And so I think that it really depends on where you are. I think that would be all in all the answer that I would have, is that I think that exists in both the US and in South Africa and the whole world actually at the moment, and I think that divide is just becoming wider and wider. I don't know if you've watched Social Dilemma.
I did. So I called Kwena a, a couple of weeks ago, I think 2-3 weeks ago. So the first thing I wanted to do was just send you a message on Instagram. And I went on Instagram and Kwena's nowhere to be found. I thought for a second, I thought, shit, has Kwena blocked me? What have I done? You know?
And then I logged in. The EFF member and
I logged
no
into I logged into another account. I tried looking for you again. You still weren't there. I felt much better. So picked up the phone, called Kwena, listened, do you want to do the podcast with me? And then I also just added, by the way, did you delete your Instagram account? What's going on? So Kwena says, yeah, I watched this documentary, The Social Dilemma, and I just, deleted the account. So I then went and watched it based on just that, because I thought, yeah, shit, this is a guy who's working in politics. Like, how far does one who works in politics have to be pushed to delete your social media?
Yeah.
And I watched it. It was brilliant. In fact, not only did I watch it, but on the way here, I live about 45 minutes away from where I am now. On the way here, I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast with Tristan Harris, who's obviously the main guy. He goes into some more detail on the podcast, chatting about, the situation. However, you're back on Instagram now.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. Why did you go off and why did you come back on?
No, for me, Social Dilemma it was sort of the nail in the coffin. But I think for a long time, personally, I saw how much of an impact specifically Instagram had on my own mental health, and how I would often do things, they say do it for the gram, how many things I would do for the gram, and instead of just living my life, I was curating my life, and then putting snapshots of it on social media. And also, there was this time where I ended up buying a drone, I watched one video on YouTube, and then I watched another, and then all over my Instagram, Facebook, I just see drone world, and then an ad, and suddenly I bought a drone I couldn't afford, And so I think for me it was just needing a break. I also think, I think lockdown really gave us all an opportunity to just stop and think, and I felt like I wanted to stop and think, but off social media. And then coming back on, I don't know, man, I felt like, I bought this really cool outfit.
Couldn't resist.
I couldn't resist not showing people this outfit, I was like...
So, for those of you who haven't seen The Social Dilemma, I would highly, highly recommend it. Basically, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's a documentary that has to do with how, over time, big media companies like Facebook, like Instagram, like Twitter, have become unethical in the way that they develop their products. And when I say unethical, I mean that they've evolved from being tools to being addictive. Now, we've all heard our parents tell us, you're addicted to your phone. But this goes a little bit deeper, as in people at Facebook, people at Twitter, people at Instagram, people at LinkedIn are actively working to figure out what in the human brain triggers addiction and how they can best harvest that to make you as addicted as possible to their product. So there's a few different examples, one of which was a very nice example for me was on Instagram. When you're at the top of your feed and you've seen everything there is to see, you click the home button, you go back to the top. If you swipe up, that little circle comes up and then suddenly there's new stuff.
Yeah.
Okay? So that seems like a handy little feature, but it's not. What they could have done instead is just making it an endless scroll and, the new stuff will show. However, they learned that people really enjoy that from slot machines.
Yeah.
Okay? So slot machines were the inspiration, where you pull something down, it rolls for a second, and then bam, people get terribly addicted to gambling. And it's the same idea, where they train your body to release endorphins every time you pull that thing, and then you can't stop, because what you're addicted to is the endorphin rush. So there's a few more examples. Things like people tagging you in a photo. When you get tagged in a photo, I don't think there will ever be a time in the history of anyone's life where they get tagged in a photo and don't check immediately.
Yeah.
Like, it's probably the quickest way to get you back on social media is to, that notification that says you've been tagged in a photo. However, so we like to think that a company like Instagram is a tool that we can use. But if it were a tool, you'd be able to see the photo you were tagged in from your lock screen without having to enter the app in the first place. However, they don't design it that way. They make sure that you go into the app at every possible opportunity. So the documentary goes very into detail talking about an attention economy and how these companies are competing not with each other, but with the rest of your life for your attention. So they want you to spend as little time doing everything else and as much time on social media so that they can show you more ads, they can make more money, they can do better. And that's the way their algorithms are built. And what this guy, Tristan Harris, and everyone who's involved in the documentary, what they are saying and advocating for is that this unethical system is making technology more and more addictive by the day. And it's causing real problems to people outside of social media. Things like anxiety and depression numbers have just spiked over the past 10 years, which perfectly coincides with the invention of things like the like button and, things like being able to see how many followers you have and that sort of thing. So, I mean, the guy talks a lot about the problem. I find he doesn't talk as much about the solution.
Yeah,
because
it's a tough one.
it's a really tough one. The solution's a lot more complex because, I mean, we can't take social media away. Or I suppose we could, but I don't think that's the right way to go about it.
Solutions.
I mean, social media is very useful in a lot of ways. I mean, social media, some of the people that I'm very excited to chat to on the podcast over the next few weeks, I've contacted through social media. I would hate for that to be taken away. But simultaneously, after watching the documentary, I decided, okay, let me test myself and leave my phone in the kitchen when I go to sleep so that I'm not on my phone until midnight, looking at memes on 9gag or whatever. And I mean, it was hard. It was a lot harder than I would have thought it was. You sort of, I remember this is really like almost embarrassing. I don't even want to chat about this, but there was a time when I had a thought about something I needed to Google, okay, like right away. I needed to know. And I always put my phone in the same place on my bedside table. I rolled over, went to reach my phone, and my hand just hit the table. And I realized, my phone's in the kitchen. And suddenly I remembered, oh yes, I'm trying not to be on my phone. Let me Google that tomorrow. I forgot to Google it, by the way. I can't remember what it was about. It was probably something about aquariums or something. But the point is that trigger was there before I could even realize that I was trying not to. And I feel like you don't really have that in other addictions because you don't have as quick of an access. So for example, if you're addicted to alcohol and you make a conscious decision, I'm going to stop drinking. To start drinking again, you need to get in your car, you need to go to the shop or go to a restaurant and order something, the whole time knowing I'm not supposed to be doing this. And I suppose there's a certain thrill to that pulls a lot of people back. But in social media, your phone's right there. I mean, you can be back on social media just out of habit before you even remember that you were trying to stop. And I would highly recommend everyone who's listening, go into your phone. I don't know how Android phones do it, but on my iPhone, you can just swipe left and see how much time you spend on average on your phone. But before you do that, guess in your head. Think to yourself, is it an hour? Is it 2 hours per day? In mine, maybe mine's higher than most, but I'm up to like almost 4 hours average on my phone over the past month. A day, which that's double what I would have guessed.
I'm on like 9.
9. Well, I think, you know what? I think I'm cheating because the other 5 hours are on my laptop.
Okay.
But yeah, it's scary. So I watched this documentary like 2-3 days ago. Or maybe it's a bit more, but I've been trying to keep off my phone, and it is it's challenging. But I'm making a little bit of progress. I'm getting into the habit of leaving my phone in the kitchen while I sleep, which I don't know if it's improved my sleep quality or not, but I feel well rested. Wow. And then also just not keeping it like against me 24/7. Not being, I mean, I was never afraid, but not being afraid to leave it somewhere. Obviously, don't leave it in the bathroom at a mall. I'm saying, like, if I stand up from my desk to go make a cup of coffee, I really don't need to be taking my phone with me. I'm not going to miss anything.
Yeah.
You know. So these sort of habits that I'm trying to work off as a direct result of that documentary, I think are very powerful. Why doesn't the DA make a documentary? I reckon that would do so well. I suppose they wouldn't put it on Netflix because it's propaganda. But if you went and made a documentary about this, the DA, welcome. This is what the DA does. We're so great. Look at the DA.
Those are ads. We have them. We have them.
They're not playing on CakeNet.
Yeah, no.
I'm not saying
that. But what interested me, I think the most, outside of the personal aspect of that documentary, and sort of coming back to a conversation we were having about the divide, was the question of information, and I think you see it in the US via that Instagram where they were talking about with the algorithms, how, I mean, because as you're saying, the attention economy, they show you content that will keep you on the app. And
it's not even necessarily content you want to see. It's the content that they've specifically figured out is the most likely to keep you watching for as long as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. And so then politically, I mean, I know when I go on Facebook, if I go on Instagram, the political content that I see is political content that matches my beliefs fully, and just continues to entrench my beliefs fully.
Confirmation bias.
Yeah. And I mean, and how they were showing that, then if you've got different political beliefs, how trying to keep you on your phone as much as possible, they show you things that just continue to entrench those beliefs. And coming back to you talking about the divide, in the US, I think that's a big aspect. But then I think inside South Africa, I mean, the majority of our population isn't on Instagram, but we've also got a ton of misinformation, One, we just talk about our democratic system, how many people that even participate inside democracy really understand the democratic process, and really understand what they're voting for, You go and you vote for, let's say the Vryheidsfront inside your local government elections, and you see their manifesto, Are they actually able to implement that manifesto given what they're running for, DA at a provincial level, ANC at a national level. And I think for me, that's what's interesting, but also scary about our democracy, and the divide that I think is growing inside our democracy is that misinformation that South Africans have, most people don't know what local government actually does, and I think a lot of the people that vote don't know, and it's also a reason why a lot of people just don't vote, and it's it's scary.
I remember there was a time that I spoke to you, I think this was last year or maybe a little bit before then, but it was so Mmusi Maimane was the leader of the DA for a long time, for a while. It was
9
like
years.
9 years.
Yeah.
Jeez, I didn't know it was that long. I thought it was like a year and a half, maybe. Yeah. This is how involved I am in politics,
and
ladies and gentlemen.
You didn't mention any of the issues during those 9 years that you mentioned when you resigned.
So this is the thing, right? So when he was still there, I remember chatting to you about Mmusi, and I can't lie and say I remember exactly what you said, but you certainly weren't anti-Mmusi at the time. Then later, Mmusi Maimane resigns. The DA, has now this new interim leader and the whole thing. And now I remember I asked you, we were having breakfast together, and I asked you, I said, so, I mean, what do you think of that Mmusi guy? And you said, never liked him. Never liked him. He was, he's just, not a fan of Mmusi Maimane. And I said to you, I think I must have asked the question of, you seem to have changed your tune. So the question that I'm trying to build up to is, do you feel pressure from your, obviously you're not going to get an email saying don't say that, but do you feel a certain pressure to adhere to what the DA says 100%, even if you might not necessarily agree with that? And then simultaneously, do you feel like this pressure is applied to all parties and affects things? Because if you're someone in the EFF or supporting the EFF, and you think to yourself, yeah, I agree with 90% of what these guys are saying, but yeah, maybe not, maybe don't sing Kill the Boer at the rally. And then when someone from EFF says, yeah, kill the Boer, you say, yeah, kill the Boer, because you don't want to be that guy.
Is that your story? Yeah.
I'm secretly.
You got peer pressure into saying such a thing.
So I mean, do you feel pressure from the DA and just from wearing that blue shirt? Do you feel like when you put that on, you have to censor yourself to a certain degree?
I don't think it's pressure. I think, there's always that story that they say, I mean, if you're in school and you're constantly called stupid, that, that then becomes your reality. And I think that the reality is that I spend time with DA people, 80% of my time. And so it's not so much a pressure, but I think it happens to all of us, is that the people we spend time with and the ideas that we're constantly exposed to do eventually affect us, And so I wouldn't even call it indoctrination. I think that it just comes down to human beings, and we're social creatures, and the community that you surround yourself in inevitably has an effect on you and the way that you see the world. And so, if I'm, as we've said, always on Facebook or in my meetings and, talking to people, when I'm with my people at a bar, and we're talking about, like I hear, can't believe Musi did that, and on Facebook, like, wow, like Musi didn't raise this for 9 years, now he's raising it. And that's constantly the message that I hear. It becomes my reality,
It's scary to think about things like that, because as humans, we often forget to distance ourselves from the situation and to look at things from a third person perspective. And there's a lot of things in life where I try very hard to look at things completely objectively, and try not to get married to an idea. I've always said I am one good conversation away from changing my opinion at any given time. Like my opinion about anything, the strongest opinions that I have, the deepest opinions that I've had for years, if you can sit down with me and explain to me why my opinion is wrong, I'm very happy to change that opinion, because I don't want to be the asshole who decides, okay, well, I'm a DA guy, and it doesn't matter what the DA does ever, I will always be a DA guy. And that's just it. Because if the DA does something that is, horrible, I would love to change my political affiliations to the better option. So it's difficult to try and get people to step outside of their thing. Now, I mean, obviously, a lot of your friends don't or will be working in politics, but for those who aren't, and for those who are not working in politics and who don't agree with your political ideas, how do you try to convince someone to step out of their reality and look at things from your point of view?
I think for me, it almost ties into what you're saying, is that I don't ever pretend that my views are set in stone. As I said, I grew up, singing Zuma songs, and I changed my tune, not because I'm a sellout or not, but because I was convinced of a new narrative. And for me, I often find when trying to convince people to just have the conversation, is to also show that, hey, look, I was there as well, not that I grew up inside this organization and that's been my reality forever, but say, no, look, I understand where you're coming from because I was there. And this is where I'm at now, and this is why. And I think that that's a more palatable message, and also not pointing fingers. I really don't fault ANC supporters. I don't fault EFF supporters. I genuinely think that the majority of public representatives in this country do have people's best interests at heart, regardless of political affiliation. And I think that generally that's why people if you see me out, you'll often see me talking to EFF people, SASCO people, it's because for me, I in the end of the day know that anyone that decides to put on a political party shirt is doing it because they believe that that's the best way to better the lives of South Africans, and I can't fault them on that. I can hope to bring them to my side, but I can't fault them for wanting to make a difference.
I like that. I like what you just said, and I think that it's a viewpoint that more of us should take, not only in politics but in everything, in trying to just realize that we're on the same team in a lot of ways. I mean, everything from down to the most grassroots level, where you're having an argument with someone about something, to realize that you have the goal in common, or at least maybe your goals differ a little bit, but they will, for the most part, people are good people, and you'll have similar goals. I was doing a poll recently, probably about 5 weeks ago or a month ago, or whatever, on Faculty of Memes. We did this big poll regarding regarding racism and the farm murders, and there were a lot of things that I agreed with and a lot of things I disagreed with. Especially the one point that was heavily contested was, can black people be racist? And then there was the majority of people who were saying, yes, of course, anyone can be racist if you hate another person because of their skin color, that makes you racist. And then there were another group, and I'm not even it wasn't even divided by race. It was like Black Lives Matter, where most of the Black Lives Matter supporters are white. This was exactly what was going on, where a lot of people say to me, that by definition, black people can't be racist, and they had this whole thing. So, we can talk about that later, but what I want to talk about now is one of the questions that I asked was, have you ever been racist, or are you racist? And some people commented and said, they were racist, and it was a higher percentage of people than I expected. It was, I can't remember, it was probably like 45% of people said, yes, I used to be racist. And then I followed that up and said, why? Why were you racist, and why are you no longer racist? And, I got so many comments from people who saying they grew up in a house where their dad hated white people, or their dad hated black people, and they just grew up like that, and it was accepted, and it was casual. There were, jokes, and that was how they grew up. They went to an Afrikaans school, they went to a completely black school, and they never, all their teachers looked that way. They never had any reason to change their ideas. Then they land in university, and suddenly, me now, Frikkie, who's come from the farm, we've been racist, suddenly Lerato down the hall is leaning in my door and saying, hey, do you want to go for a drink? And, now I'm thinking, shit, is this not bad? Yeah. and then you go out for the drink and you have a great time, and you realize, maybe I've been wrong all along. So these kind of experiences that change people at their roots are so important.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you transitioning from ANC to DA, which is a big jump. It's not an easy thing to do. I'm sure that it must have taken that same level of experience where you just think, maybe I should reevaluate what I've been talking about. But these experiences can only help you so much, because you need to be willing to listen, and you need to be willing to be open, and like you said, not have your ideas set in stone. So yeah, I think it's extremely important to listen to people around you. So how do you, if you now arrive at a campaigning event, and there's someone there from EFF, SC, that's what they call
student command.
Yeah, and the student command, and immediately you're on there's risk of conflict, because straight from the get-go, your shirt is anti his shirt and his shirt is anti yours. But how do you get to the person? How do you say, not hi, I'm from the DA, we're here to chat. How do you say, hello, I'm Kwena, and have a civil conversation with someone who agrees or disagrees with you so fundamentally?
I think, I mean, you touched on it, it's about just saying, hi, I'm Kwena, not hi, I'm Kwena from the DA, and I also think to a large extent, and it's where I said that, I think that on an ideological level, we disagree fundamentally, but when it comes to the core of why we do what we do, we don't differ. And I think it's about touching on that, is that in the end of the day, that EFF member that puts on that shirt is there because that's how he or she or they believe that they're going to better the lives of
The
their
people they
people.
care about, yeah.
And it's the same when I put on my shirt, and I think it really is just touching on that, and I've never experienced a situation where I haven't had even like a fun conversation with with opposition party members, because in the end of the day, I think that for me it's always been about just saying, first and foremost, you're here because you want to make a difference, um, and I'm here because I want to make a difference, and that for me is enough, that we should be able to treat each other with civility, and then after that, now let's have conversations, let's have our debates, and I mean, also a lot of it is show, I always laugh. There'll be times where we're doing interviews, there was an interview between me and Tabo and ENCA, Let's Have It Out. We were at each other's throats, at each other's throats. But every single time there was an ad break, me and him were laughing, joking, oh, I got you there. Him, oh, I got you. Gets back on. Suddenly the anger's there. A lot of it's also, it's a bit of a show,
I see.
And I mean, as I sometimes call politics a circus, but yeah, for me, it always comes down, and I wish it was something that, more leaders could be honest about. Is that in the end of the day, we're all here because we want to make a difference, and we should be able to start from that point, and build from there. And disagree. I mean, that's the point of democracy.
Yeah.
We're not meant to agree, but how do we do so in a constructive way?
I agree with you. In a constructive way.
In a constructive way.
No, I see what you mean.
And also, I think it's how do you listen, and you had touched on that, because I think also one of the issues that we face, I, for example, wasn't happy with the way that opposition parties handled the coronavirus and the lockdown in terms of the narrative, and I don't exclude my party from that. I felt like, for example, that was the time where we should have all come together and not tried to score political points, The reality with lockdown is that, hey, Cyril was fucked if he did and fucked if he didn't. That's the truth, Now I'm not talking about, the ANC with the looting and let's move that to the side, like just in the beginning when Cyril came out, and there was a trying to do, there was a message of unity, and something that I think a lot of people were tapping into, that we are South Africans, we need to do this together. But it immediately became political, no, Cyril's doing this wrong, from all opposition parties. And for me, that should have been conversations that happened behind closed doors to say, hey, look, this is how we think we should do it, versus publicly to try and gain support. Because I think that's to me one of the biggest issues with our political system at the moment, is that we shy away from compromise, because shying away from compromise could potentially lead to letting go of a certain voter base. If you admit that, okay, the EFF's right on this, some of your supporters might say, okay, then we're going to the EFF. And so we, on a public level, I see it inside my committee meetings, even SRC levels, where when you're sitting with these guys in private, we can all agree on a lot of things, but in public, we don't, and it's because it's almost what you touched on, is that it's like you have to push a certain narrative, and you can't shy away from that narrative. And to me, it's one of the sad things about our democracy, and one of the things that I don't like about our current political system.
I understand. I think so. So this is to those listening right now. This is the moment that South Africa changes forever, because I'm about to pitch an idea, okay? And it's going to be the most revolutionary thing ever. Okay,
Really?
so firstly, political parties need to not be a thing.
Okay.
So we remove political parties altogether, okay? So you are no longer Kwena from the DA, you're just Kwena, okay? And everyone in the country. Cyril, he's just Cyril, okay? Now, so we remove political parties altogether. It's not a thing anymore.
Okay.
From now on, when you vote for a person, okay? You don't vote for a party anymore, because I feel like that parties come with too many strings. Like, people are so willing to vote for a party even if they don't like the leader because they love the party or the party. I mean, we see this, a lot of people in the DA like to complain about the ANC for this reason, because the people in the DA really, or at least in my experience, really believe that the people who vote for the ANC are only doing so because they feel they should. That's a narrative I hear a lot, because I live in a very DA heavy area, and you've got the people with the pamphlets, and they come out on Sunday mornings and, hi, how are you doing? You heard of the DA? Yes, I have. So it's
that voice.
So yes, you wouldn't believe it. I'm not going to say her name, but the woman who is the mayor of the town I'm from is, I mean, she's great. I'm sure she's lovely.
To
like,
the
if you
listeners,
get
you should see his face right now.
I'm sure she's a lovely person, but she's she's such a Karen. She complains about everything, and it's just, and always she'll go on Facebook. We've got this group, this area group for this Facebook group. I suppose I can say the group name, but that's going to give away who this person is. It's basically Bedford View. So she goes on basically Bedford View, and then she'll post these things saying, the roads are looking so terrible. It's because the ANC hasn't done anything, and we're not getting any help. And then she'll post pictures of cleaning teams going through Bedford View, proudly DA cleaning teams. We're doing what the ANC won't. It's I can't stand it, because it's if there's one thing I dislike more than arguing, it's complaining. Complaining is, I hate it when people just complain constantly. Just do it then. Get a solution. Go. Stop virtue signaling. Just clean the roads. If you want the roads clean, you're the mayor of this town. Get the roads cleaned. Stop complaining. But anyway, I've gone on a rant now. But the point that I'm trying to make, I've actually completely forgotten what I was saying. Panel government. Okay, we're getting back to that. So, remove political parties altogether. So now, remove the title of president. That's not a thing anymore. Okay, we now have something akin to a prime minister. Okay, it's somewhat like that. So, the government is now a panel. That's why I said panel government. Okay, panel government. It's going to be a thing. So, government's now a panel. So you have a seat around this in a really nice table somewhere in Cape Town or wherever. You have this table. Okay, so the table has, let's say, we can divide South Africa up into 40, almost like the ministers. Okay, we divide it up into these sectors. And when we now, so let's say we have the sector of agriculture. When we now have the sector of agriculture, we're not going to choose someone from a political party. That's stupid. We're going to choose the person who knows the most in this whole country about agriculture. Okay, so there's this guy. He's been running a massive network of farms in the Eastern Cape for 50 years. He knows everything. He knows everyone. This guy is smart. He has this degree. He's brilliant. He's clearly the best man for the job. He's been retired for 10 years. He doesn't have any ties to his farms anymore. We say, hello, Thabo, you are the best farmer ever. Please come and be our representative in the panel government for agriculture. And he'll say, okay, sounds grand. So now each seat is filled up like this. Okay, so now we get the best people, the most qualified person for the job in every single seat. Okay, so that's part one. So now we've clearly got the best government possible, because everyone knows exactly what they're talking about. They know what agendas to push and so on. Like the Minister of Finance, for example, there's no more, the minister there's deep negotiations about where the budget's going. Okay, so that's step one. Step two, we remove all the smoke. Okay, so how do we do that? We've got cameras.
What do you mean the smoke?
The smoke. They're like, the closed doors. We make everything transparent. Literally everything is transparent. Okay, there's cameras with audio feeds that, they've got those nice cameras that that point towards whoever's speaking at the moment. So we get those, we put them in the table, and whoever's speaking, like these people have meetings on the reg. So they chat.
Panel.
Yeah, the panel government, yes. They chat, and this footage is broadcast. It's like live. Anyone can go. You turn on SABC, we make a new SABC. We'll have SABC 0.
Yeah, one that works.
Panel government. Okay? You click on it, and you can watch their meetings. You can sit there, bowl of popcorn, what is going on. Okay, so that's step 2. So now there's no more corruption, because we all know that this minister didn't get an extra R1 billion because he is a nice guy. We now know that he got that through intense negotiation with the Minister of Education, where they had like back and forth arguments and PowerPoint presentations explaining why they should get the money. You now know this is why I got the money. Okay. So, step 2. There's only 3 steps.
There's 3 steps. I'm ready for step 3.
So, last step. Every week, every person who's on the panel has a, let's say, 1 hour slot, okay, on this new channel, SABC 0. They've got their slot, okay? So let's say my name is Jakob. I'm the Minister of Education because I was head of this area's, education for many years. I know exactly how everything works. Now I'm head of education. I'm the most qualified guy. So I am getting, SABC 0 is getting tweets, right? People are saying, at SABC 0, why would the education department put money into this? Isn't it better to put money into that? Okay, now there's a person, a receptionist, who's collecting these questions, grouping them into categories. And she passes those questions off to Minister of Education. Now Jakob sees these questions, and let's say his slot is every Monday from 9 to 10 a.m. Okay, now Jakob comes on. It's live. Or we can pre-record. Doesn't even matter. It comes up. Hi, I'm Jakob. I'm the Minister of Education. Today I'm going to be dealing with some of the questions on South Africans' minds about why I have made the decisions that I've made. So then he says, okay, so Tuli2349 has asked the question, why did we allocate money to this sector but not that sector? Well, PowerPoint behind him, like the weather lady. Okay, it comes up. Well, if you look at this graph here, this area has shown an increase in quality. This area is underfunded. So we decided to reallocate. And then everyone's on the same page. And it just works. It's just perfect. Now, obviously, this doesn't work at a municipal level. However, or maybe it can. Just, we'll have sub-SABCs. But the point is...
0.1.
The point is then, the people who get to argue with all the facts. You don't get to sit there and write your Facebook post on basically Bedford View and say, they're all thieves. They just want to take our money and they want to go and buy fancy houses. You don't get to do that, okay? Because everyone knows that the reason why that money went there is because of this. The reason why that decision was made because of this. And if you don't know, you have no excuse to not go educate yourself on the way the government works. And then also, we remove the whole problem of people getting put into positions they're not equipped for. Like the Minister of Police should be someone who knows everything about the police. He's worked in the police. He's worked with the police. He's the best policeman. Okay? He's the best.
Yeah.
That guy.
The best policeman. That top cop.
That top cop. Okay? That, Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he is the minister. And he sits at that table and he says, right, we are going to solve this problem. This is how we're going to do it. And he keeps the nation updated. And then if something fails, if something goes wrong, and we say, okay, you know what? We really tried our very best. This is the information we had at the time. We tried our very best to avoid this situation. Like the pandemic's a perfect example, right? So pandemic happens. Now we have an emergency meeting. It's broadcast live. The panel's chatting. They're saying, listen, this is a big problem, big virus. It's going to be a massive story. Let's solve this together. They come up. They're smart people. They're the best, okay? Smart people. They chat, they come up with these solutions. They say to the country, listen, they've got a PowerPoint again. This PowerPoint solve everything. They say, listen, this is how we're going to solve this problem. We've based our strategy on this, this, and this. We're going to open this to all South Africans for a week before we implement. If you think we've done something stupid, please tell us, and we'll deal with it during the week. Next week, Friday, we're going to give our official final plan and we're going to implement it. 6 months down the line, the plan didn't work. Okay, we've got a big problem. The numbers are worse than ever. It didn't work. But then you can't look at the government and say, oh, they didn't know what they were doing, because you know they knew what they were doing. You had your chance to contribute to this discussion, and whether you did or you didn't, you can clearly see their train of thought to the decision that they made. So I think that'll solve all problems.
Wow.
So this is
the panel government.
Exactly, the panel government. And there's no like
copyrighted.
There's no terms. There's no like, oh well, people vote. We still have elections. We can have a yearly election or a once every 3 years or 4 or 5 or whatever. We have elections where instead of going on that ballot and you tick off, hey, I really like the EFF, you go and you say, okay, shit, there's 5 people running for Minister of Education. And then they've got little profiles, okay? This is Eddie. Eddie, he's amazing. This is all the places Eddie's worked. This is his degree that he's got. This is, here's all the details about Eddie. And then next one, we've got, Tiseng. This is Tiseng. She's incredible. She's done all this. And then you go and you say, obviously there's details available before election day. You're not going to sit in there for an hour making your decision. But the point is, you vote for the best man, the best man for the job, or woman. And it has nothing to do with any political parties.
Sure.
Panel government.
Panel government
is going to be a thing. But it's not going to be a thing.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why it's not, because no one benefits from that except the people. There's no politician benefiting from panel government.
I don't even know if the people would benefit from that panel government.
It's a perfect system. What do you mean the people won't benefit? Call out one flaw in my proposition.
Yeah, a lot of flaws. So one, there wouldn't be 5 people that would run for Minister of Agriculture. There'd be like 10,000 people.
No, but we cut out. There'd be a selection process beforehand.
Who's doing the selection process?
So the selection process is done based only on qualifications. That's it. So we release. So we say, okay, next year we're going to have the panel government election for Minister of Agriculture. Please submit your CVs if you'd like. Okay. And now the CVs come in. We can even have a computer do it. The CV says, that guy's only got matric. This guy's got a BSc in agriculture. Okay, plus 5 points, this guy. And then we keep adding points based on years of experience, based on, published works, based on et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the top 5 go through, final round. Okay, here's your 5 nominees.
Yeah.
That's how it will work.
Sure, that's an intense one, because don't you think that then goes against the principles of democracy? If I feel that I should be able to stand for Minister of Agriculture, regardless of whether I have 5 years experience or 1 year experience, should I not be allowed to put my name forward and have people vote for me if they choose?
So I get what you're saying, but I feel like it's a deeply flawed system, because then it just becomes a popularity contest. We can't have a popularity contest. We need the best man in the job, or woman, not the most popular. We need the best person in the job.
That's the tough part, though, because it's how do you decide who's the best objectively? Because objectively is also I don't think that exists.
Okay, so in the perfect world where everyone is reasonable and rational, panel government works.
No. I agree on that perfect world. But I agree with you to a certain extent on a few things. One, I wouldn't completely remove political organizations, but I think
you'd be out of a job.
No. Me, I think I'd do well if I contested even as Kwena.
I see. Which minister position would you run for? You reckon? Where do you feel you have expertise?
I'd want to start just in like sports.
Sports. But based on my system, we'd probably have like. We'd probably have Jean de Villiers as the Minister of Sports, or some we'd have Castor Semenya up there, someone who's like carried the flag high. We say, you run so fast, come be the Minister of Sports.
No, you should see me playing 5-a-side. I think I qualify objectively. But I wouldn't knock political organizations completely, but I like the US system and the British system, where you run under the banner of an organization.
But you run as yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
brilliant.
Because to me, I think where political organizations become critical for me is that if you had a room of 400 independents, for example, in parliament that have all been elected. So I went and I said, you know what, I'm pro building a wall, and you go and you say you are pro, opening the borders, I get a lot of votes from my constituency, you get a lot of votes from your constituency. Now we have 400 people that are all there, very issue specific, you wouldn't get anywhere because government is so much broader than, just one single issue, and what I like about political organizations is at least then you can deal with issues broadly, but I agree that my biggest issue with our political system and my job, for example, is that in the end of the day, you couldn't remove me, but my organization can. And then the question comes in, who am I loyal to? My organization or voters, And to me, that's the flaw. And
that's a big problem.
Yeah.
And it's so we touch on the US system. I think the US system is flawed deeply.
Yeah.
But
at electoral college.
Yeah, I'm not so on board with that idea.
No.
I mean, I understand kind of, but it's not really. I understand it. I couldn't think of anyone who designed it that way intentionally. Like I feel like there's a comedy special on Netflix where the comedians chatting about the Declaration of Independence because the Americans are so hardcore. We gotta follow that. It's like, and the joke the comedian makes, he says, it's like, it's the scroll, you cannot change, don't change the scroll. The scroll is sacred. And he said that if we were to bring the founding fathers of America to today, the first question they would ask is, you guys didn't write any new stuff?
Yeah.
Like this, I wrote that with a feather. You didn't add anything.
Oh my gosh.
I feel like it's it's a joke, but it's such a good point because we need to change things regularly. They need to be fluid and adapt to the situation well. So, touching on the US election system, I think that it's the one thing I really like about it is that you vote for a person. Like even now, we've got the TV on in the background because we can't live without seeing these election results the second they come out, or at least the call on Nevada. But on the TV it doesn't say Republican versus Democrat. This is how many votes they have. It says Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. This is how many votes. This is how many seats. And so on. So I think that we should definitely be taking that from them and apply that to our own system. Because now, obviously, the DA's just announced John Steenhuisen as I see he follows you on Instagram.
Makes me quite happy.
I saw it when I went to it because
we made it.
I'm following him on the Ground Floor Podcast's Instagram. So when I went to go follow you when you finally got your Instagram back, I was like, I gotta. Maybe Kwena has his number. I'll have him on the show. But yeah, the point I'm trying to make is I think that we should have ballot papers that people can, that don't even, political party name shouldn't even be on that paper. You should be voting for the person who you like the most. I think that's really good. But then I would retain the popular vote, which the US doesn't use. I mean, in every election, like the previous one with Hillary and Trump, the majority of Americans voted for Hillary, but because of the electoral college system, Trump won. And if he wins now, again, it'll be for the same reason, because Biden's well ahead in the popular vote. So we have a popular vote system, which I do like. But I still, as much as political parties are a part of who we are as South Africans, and as much as I respect you and your job, I can't help but feel like we would do better without them. Because I really feel as if tribalism around political parties. There's a meme that I saw a long time ago where a guy just appears in the world and he gets given a blue flag and he doesn't know what it's for, and he's just given this blue flag. And he looks over, he doesn't know anything. All he knows is he's got this blue flag. And he looks over and he sees a guy with a brown flag. And he says, well, fuck that guy. You know, and it's you know, with no context, and it's a meme, but it's accurate. People do that. I mean, you want to stick to your tribe, and you want to think that your tribe is the best tribe. And I mean, that's something evolutionarily that we've evolved with, and it's served us very well for many years until now, because now we've got a situation where people can't even disagree with each other anymore, and people can't talk to one another about things they disagree on without deciding that they hate one another. It's a big problem. So, in maybe not abolish political parties altogether, but there needs to be a bit of a shake-up to make it so that people aren't voting for a party just because they think they should, but rather because they truly agree with the values of that party and truly understand them at a deep level. Yeah. I think it's very important.
No, like I said, I'd still stick to political organizations.
Well,
should
of course
exist.
you would. Yeah.
No, even taking my political hat off, I'd keep political
So what do you
organizations.
think are the benefits of political organizations?
It's just a broader mandate, you know. When you talk about moving a country forward, it can't be off a specific issue, you know. And what I think the positives of a political organization is that you can have a detailed plan, you know, detailed plan to say, this is what we're going to do in regards to the environment. This is what we're going to do in regards to the economy. This is what we're going to do in regards to redress. And that is a blueprint that you can push forward together. As opposed to, as I said, with Parliament, if you had 400 people with 400 different blueprints for how you're going to move the country forward, it would be a complete mess, you know, and it would be haphazard, you know, because 250 MPs could agree on this is how we go green, you know, and then for an economic policy, 250 could agree that this is how we move forward, even though it clashes with that green policy, you know, and so for me, that's the value of political organizations, that you can say that broadly, this is the plan moving forward. But as I said, I also think that the issue that we currently face in the country is that people become subservient to or loyal to the political organization versus being loyal to the voters. And it's why, for me, if there's more, and I like that, you know, I mean, Constitutional Court has ruled that 2024 South Africa needs to allow for independent candidates to contest, you know. I think that is a very big and necessary step for our democracy. But I think also touching on your aspect of you know, that, you know, people vote for the political organizations, and I come with my blue flag, they come with their red flag, you know. I think that would happen even with independence. I think that's a human problem, you know, is that as humans, you could be the independent candidate and you're saying, you know, as I said, open the borders. I'm the independent candidate saying close the borders. There'd still be those tensions, you know, and given the world we live in, there'd still be that, you know, nah, man, you know, people would be saying, fuck those Kwena supporters, you know. Yeah. It doesn't need to be DA, but they'd say that grouping, you know.
No, I see. Actually, you know, I agree with you. And this is something I haven't really thought about before, is that even in the perfect panel government system, you know, when there are two people who are very... You're laughing at my system.
The panel government
I mean, if you get two people running for the same position who are very, very similar, or if you just, I mean, you know, Minister of Agriculture nominee A wants to, you know, switch everything to a certain crop because it's best for exporting, and the other one wants us to, you know, to hell with exporting altogether, let's just supply our own people, and, you know, it's there will be a sense of tribalism always. And it's difficult because it's almost like what we were chatting about earlier, where you say that you need to step away from yourself and look at a problem completely objectively, because no two people are ever going to sit around a table and agree on something 100%. And you need to recognize that even though you, as a Trump supporter, for example, you love Trump, you think everything he ever does is amazing, you're not going to agree on everything. If Trump were to come to your house for supper tonight and you were to make him your best dish and have a nice chat. There will be things where he just says, well, I mean, I guess we just have different opinions. He might not say it like that, but
So you're stupid.
you're a moron. But yeah, it's difficult. And I think that this idea that we need to be able to step away from ourselves and say, okay, I don't necessarily agree with everything that you do, but I agree with, the parts that I care about, we're on the same terms, so I'm going to vote for you. Rather than I disagree with one thing that you do, so I'm not going to vote for you at all. I think it's something we need to move towards. So I've been wanting to ask a question since we sat down. What are your ambitions within the DA or within the political sphere? Is this politics isn't really an industry, but whatever you would call it, the political, realm. Is this what you want to be working in for the rest of your life? Do you feel like this is where you make the biggest difference?
So I decided actually during the COVID time, during my time of reflection, that I wasn't gonna stand for local government again. So this is my last term in council. I'll still remain a DA member, but I think for me, my question really is how do I go out and make a difference, but without the sort of the baggage that comes with
The
constantly wearing
restrictions,
a certain party color, and I also think just for me on a personal level, it's what we've been talking about. When you surround yourself with ideas constantly, those ideas just become almost what you had said is just it's a truth. That became like the ideas I surround myself with have become my truth. And for me, I want time to figure out, what is it that I believe in. There are a lot of policies that I speak about, and it's across the board. You see it in a lot of political organizations. People speak about it, but they don't fully understand what it is they're speaking about. And I think for me, I want, just like with Instagram, how I took a step out to say, let me find myself. Same with politics. I want to step out to say, who am I? What are my beliefs? And not confined in the context of a political organization. Because it's one of the tough things being a young person in a university. That's the time where your ideas develop, but if you're being given a script, it's difficult to figure out what is it that you stand for. My long-term dream is that I would really like, one, to make a lot of money, and then use that money to invest in social movements. I think about, Fees Must Fall in 2015, even the Girls High, the hair policy, with those kind of battles. I would love to empower social movements to fight against institutions that have resources already. I'd love to be able to pay for buses, to pay for stages, but to really empower social movements to fight on an equal basis as the structures that they're constantly fighting against. So that's my long-term dream. The problem is that takes money, so we'll see whether I'm able to make money or not.
I see.
But that's definitely the dream. For me, I've always, from being a child, but I saw it through being a politician, that I've always just wanted to make a difference.
Okay, so what's on the top of your priority list? Because we've got so many issues you can deal with today. We can deal with Black Lives Matter. We can deal with gender-based violence. We can deal with climate change. We can deal with inequality. We can deal with poverty. We can deal with a million different things. As a human, there's so many things you can dedicate your life to. What is on top of that list for you?
For me, definitely gender-based violence. I think that especially my time in SRC really shaped the way that I saw the world and saw the attack or the war that's being waged on South African women on a daily basis.
How did your time at the SRC give you that idea?
The issues that students would come to me with, often students would come to us with cases of gender-based violence and saying, hey, I need accommodation because this is the situation at home, or this and this is happening on campus, and so I was exposed to the issue a lot more, but I also think I was involved a lot more in the debates, and that opened my mind, and I think for me, it was also just realizing how much of a role just us, put in quote, normal guys, the role we play in creating the system, the conversations that Trump refers to as like locker room talk, where people have said things where just because 10 people are laughing, I just decide let me not say this is an issue. I think that upon reflection, I realized for me the biggest issue is the culture, and it's a culture that actually all of us men in our individual capacities and individual lives and our groups have the power to change, but we often don't, because it just feels uncomfortable. You don't want to be that guy that's, calling people out, inside the circle, and a guy saying a sexist comment, and you know what I mean? So for me, that's definitely the biggest issue that I would like to tackle. I joined a startup NPO at the end of last year, Safe Spaces, and we're trying to develop an app for gender-based violence reporting. Like essentially, it's just a one-stop shop to assist in that fight. But that's always there. That's been my passion for a very, very long time now, is trying to figure out how we tackle the issue of gender-based violence.
I find it really interesting that your report on this is very similar to David's. Obviously, you've had the same position. It's shocking to me how often gender-based violence affects students. Because if I really, before these chats, if I were to take a guess, I would say that gender-based violence is affecting, people who are not at university, people who are in rural areas, people who are in informal settlements and so on. I feel like that's really the breeding ground where it happens. But I'm realizing more and more that it's it of course it certainly does happen there, but it happens here too. It happens. We're sitting now in this apartment, and there's probably 40, 50, 60 more apartments that will have seen these sorts of things recently. It's an issue that's closer to home than you might realize. And I remember there was such a brilliant ad that played a long time ago, where it would have two different, so they would take two images, one of something terrible and tragic and one of something beautiful, but they would match them perfectly. So for example, you would see two images. The first image is of a person blowing a dandelion, and the second image is of a rural, impoverished person doing the same face motion to drink out of a puddle.
Sure.
And they'll put those two images together and sort of slice them down the middle, so that you can clearly see both sides. It's very well done. And you can clearly see what's happening on both sides. So now you've got this terrible contrast between this beautiful, happy little girl blowing this dandelion into the air, and then also this impoverished child drinking out of a mud puddle. And they had many images like this. And it wasn't just that one. There were some that were like, things that stick with you. And the tagline was the same on every image. It said, just because it's not happening here doesn't mean it's not happening. And it's so easy for us to live in our bubble and think that if a problem isn't affecting us, it isn't as bad as it seems. And we've seen a lot of this with the coronavirus, especially. And you see a lot of people, especially in the US, making videos saying, "Well, I'm not sick. I don't know anyone who's sick. This virus is a sham." And not realizing that, if you live on a farm in Ohio, your odds of seeing anything about this virus are a lot less than someone who lives in Brooklyn, on the 14th floor of their high rise. So it's a different situation. So the point that I'm trying to make, and I feel like I keep I keep drifting off of these points, consistently. The point that I'm trying to make is that with gender-based violence, I'm realizing more and more that it's happening around us. Is that something which shocked you when you came into the position? Suddenly, first day, Monday morning, and someone comes in with this problem, and suddenly it's a daily thing. Is that something which shocked you a lot?
Yeah, no, definitely, because it is. It's that that the issue is happening, but you hear stats. You hear this percentage of women will experience sexual assault in their life. You hear stats, but it's not real. There's a difference between a number and seeing a person in front of you. And it was then consistently seeing people in front of me, and so I think that was the one aspect. But then I think the second aspect was also self-reflection, because I think that the other aspect is that when we think about gender-based violence and we think about rape, there's also always this image of violence, and that's not always the case, the issue is the lack of consent, and for me, I thought about all my times at the strip, where you would see girls just getting so drunk, as an example, even I went home, and I think that was the thing for me, reflecting on myself. I was like, no, there were times where I would be drinking, there'd be a girl drinking, we'd go home together, and then that question of, was she in the state where she was able to give consent, and for me, I believe the answer has always been yes, but it was also a very fine line, and I think that's what also became a reality for me, was to say that also a lot of these situations aren't when we have it in our minds that someone was held down, but just that someone didn't say no, but also didn't say yes. I think that's the more important part, and I think that was the big thing for me, was realizing, how actually a part of that culture I was, and I think the majority of us are, and it scared me, I remember I was having a braai just down the road with friends, and we had said, no guys, like, let's just have an honest conversation about this thing, because we're like, this is a huge issue, and how are we going to do something about it, and for us, we said, no, let's reflect and let's see how we are creating, because as I said, for me, it's a culture that allows for men to act in the way that they do, and unless as men we say we're going to change that culture, we're actually allowing for those things to happen, and so I think it was also for me just a lot of self-reflection and thinking about the way that we operate in Hatfield, even as students, to say that this is a serious issue, and an issue that's close to home, and I saw it even when there were those gender-based violence protests. There were a lot of guys on that list who inside their minds genuinely didn't believe they had raped someone, but again, it's as we said, there was that lack of consent, and so it was rape, and for me, it's also then, so how do we go about changing that culture, understanding the concept of consent, so that we are able to end this war, because it's just rough.
I think it's so difficult because, and I might get some flack for saying this, but I can't put myself in a headspace where someone who is drunk at Latinos, and there's a drunk girl at Latinos, and start making out, go home together, and I can't look at that and say that guy deserves to be prosecuted just as much as the guy who is waiting in the park and uses force, and it's a traditional, like, the type of rape you see on TV, where that's the image that's always been in our heads. I can't put those two guys in the same box, because it's it's so difficult, because there's okay, so in the US, you've had a few cases. I don't know if we've really had much of this in South Africa, but a few cases where men have gone to prison on fake rape assaults. And I think it's so difficult to have a conversation about fake rape. I think I said assaults just now. I meant to say accusations. Fake rape accusations, without sounding like you're defending rapists or defending people who just don't ask for consent and it just sort of happens. But I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, because the line is so thin, and the line it changes from situation to situation. Because if you're a guy, I mean, I don't go out to clubs, and I don't drink, and it's not something that I do. But a lot of my friends are very involved in this culture, and it's something that's it's a big part of their lives. I mean, not just let's flip it. Let's give it a bit of a different twist, where a woman is bringing home 2 or 3 different guys a week in various states of intoxication. And there's never going to be a situation where the two people are equally intoxicated. And now you need to ask yourself: this man and this woman came home together, they slept together, no one gave any consent. What's the call then? Because if they wake up and the guy says, I actually didn't want to do that, and I feel like I was pressured, or if the girl says that, how accountable can you be held for making a decision that is different to someone else? But I'm finding it very difficult to word this properly. But I hope you understand what I mean. Is how do you go about saying this guy deserves to be punished, but this guy probably doesn't, and it's just a matter of intent, really, and then also effort to get consent. If you made the slightest bit of effort to get consent, that could play either way. Because if you said to the girl, is this okay with you, and she doesn't say anything, that's almost, and then you go through with it, that's almost just as bad as a no, because then clearly she's not in the state. But if you do get in a heat of the moment situation where two people just, go at it, and that's it, and then, afterwards, you get the conversation of, that was not actually something I wanted to do, but this other person didn't necessarily pressure them, and it's a fine line. It's all that I'm saying.
I think that's the tough part, because it's, I hear that argument, but also if I got, blackout drunk, which I've done before, if I got blackout drunk and killed someone, I'd still be charged with murder,
Yes.
So so the intent becomes a tough one, because it's more the act. But I think the key thing, and it's why I say it comes down to me about the culture, is right now it's a very fine line, that's reality. And for me, it's almost, how do you make that line bigger, and for me, it then becomes that conversation about consent, and changing the culture. But it's a very tough one, because it's, as you've said, if you're blackout drunk, and you didn't give consent, tomorrow can you wake up and say that you were raped, and a lot of people would say no, versus if it's the opposite way around. And
it's a conversation about taking responsibility for yourself. I almost want to say taking responsibility for yourself versus taking responsibility for yourself, because you want to either take responsibility for what you allow to happen to you, versus taking responsibility for the decisions you make to put yourself in that situation in the first place. And this is probably one of the most controversial things ever. And something that I don't like at all is this, blaming the victim mentality, where, and you see it a lot, where a woman will get raped and people will say, well, she was asking for it because she was wearing that, or she was behaving like this, which is bullshit. Yeah. Like that's completely off the table on the one side. Then on the other side, you do have to ask this question of, are you putting yourself in a situation where your chance of making a terrible decision is just much higher? Much higher. So, I mean, I'm not anti-alcohol, and I never have been. But if you go out to the strip as a guy, okay? So I'm going out to the strip. I don't want to sleep with anyone tonight. I get blackout drunk. I wake up in this girl's bed tomorrow. How much authority do I have to say, you should have made that decision for me? Or you should have, you're accountable despite the fact that I walked into that, not the situation of being raped, but the situation of being blackout drunk, So it's extremely complex. And I'd love to hear some of the people who are listening, if you've listened thus far or this far, congratulations. But I just want to mention this quickly. In the stats over the past 2 weeks, both episodes that I've uploaded have had loads of listeners all over the country, which I'm very happy about. And one listener in Arkansas.
Wow.
I'm not really sure why.
Arkansas.
Arkansas. No, there's one listener there in Arkansas. So if you are our Arkansas listener, thank you very much for your international support. We do appreciate it. And this will be on YouTube as well. So people are welcome to comment there, and I'll post on I'll post on the Ground Floor Podcast Instagram. There will be a post about this episode, so you're welcome to comment there on your thoughts and opinions in this regard as well. But it's an extremely difficult topic, and to draw the line is, it has to be done on a case-by-case basis, because it's like you said, you want to make the line a little bit thicker, but you can only really do that for yourself. I mean, you as Kwena can say, I will always ask for consent, because then I know where I stand. But you can't say that your mate is going to do that. And now if you get in a situation where your mate's girlfriend comes to you and says, listen, he raped me, and you then have a conversation and she says, well, we both got completely blackout drunk. I can't remember anything, but we woke up, having had sex, and I definitely didn't want to do that. Where do you now, as this guy's friend, do you say, well, that counts, or do you say that doesn't really count, or do you say it counts a little bit to a certain extent? You can only really then make a recommendation and say, okay, in future do this. But if you have to judge that case, it's very, very complex.
Yeah, with one, our Minister of Police, when he talks about his hate of alcohol, I'm with him. I think that alcohol is the reason for so many of the issues in our country, and makes this very conversation that much more difficult, But I think, for me, I don't have the answer, but I think it's about having the conversation, and I think it is a conversation that needs to start happening a lot more at institutions of higher learning. I think especially also inside residences, I mean, there you're in a hyper-masculine space, it's like we're talking about with politics, where there's certain ideas that can become a reality to me. There's the same inside those spaces, and I think that conversations need to start happening amongst men, but also then, amongst just people as a whole, because as you were saying, it's very multifaceted and very, very complex, this issue. But it's conversations that I'd like to be a part of, going forward in life, because for me it really is a huge issue. And I mean, it's like it's the one aspect is the consent issue, but then there's also the violence issue, where you talk about the person waiting in the park with a knife, the very clear saying no and someone still, raping someone. And for me with that one, then it really becomes about the culture, how do we as men start to have a conversation where women aren't seen as objects, because it starts off with, it's like the catcalling that, where we participate at a very small level, but that creates almost the foundation for
a culture.
Yeah, that says that a woman is an object, that you can therefore, that object you don't need consent from, and so I think that there's a lot of conversations that need to happen. There's that more complex one, and then one that I think is a lot easier to say. How do we ensure that we are not objectifying women, that women are seen as equal, treated as equals, and how do we do that in our everyday lives? Because that's how I think we ultimately destroy the culture that allows for, that's been enabling this war on women.
So you think that, I mean, there's obviously, I think, undoubtedly across the world in almost everything. I mean, a lot of situations, except those which are, hyper transformed, you do get a space where men are represented more and thus held less accountable. So do you think that moving towards a space where there's true equality of opportunity, and where we really do get what you see in Scandinavian countries, where you get a near perfect divide between men and women, just based on, not based on quotas, but just based on the fact that fundamentally we are very equal in our abilities. So you see this in hyper transformed countries where there's equal representation in everything, in business, in government, in police, and across the board. Do you think that moving towards that is the most important battle in the war against GBV? Because if you're a I'll pick anything. If you're a businessman and you're sitting in an office and there's 9 guys and 2 women sitting around panel government's table, and you, as part of the panel government, the TV goes off, or the camera goes off for a second, and you make a sexist joke. So SABC 0 is down, and you make a sexist joke. You're much more likely to not be held accountable in a space where that joke is at the expense of only 2 out of 11 people, as opposed to being, at the expense of half.
Yeah.
Like it happens with racism too. I mean, how much easier is it to make a racist joke in a space where everyone's of the same race?
Yeah.
As opposed to making a racist joke in a space where there's a good mix and you realize, I'm going to offend as many people as I'm going to make laugh. I mean, not that they should even be laughing in the first place, but you know what I mean. So do you think that that's the most important thing, is moving towards a society where things are a little bit more equal?
I think almost that would be a byproduct of that change of culture, But for me, it's a change of culture that's the most important thing. And I think that once that culture changes, that you would see, as you were saying, without quotas, just more women inside various spaces, because they deserve to be there, but it's a tough one.
It is. It is definitely a tough one. And thank you for chatting to me about it. So I mean, we're coming up on the last 7 or 8 minutes now. I want to ask you. So, what do you reckon is the responsibility of the average person in South Africa? Someone who doesn't have a government position, someone who's not working in the DA, or not working in a position where they really have too much pull. What do you think is that guy's responsibility to try and cure the culture and get to a space where things are a bit safer, and people can feel a bit more at ease?
Oh, you're speaking about GBV or just in general?
Well, I mean, you can do both. I think
in general, for me, it's about active citizenry. Or citizenship. Yeah, that I'm going to say citizenry. I'm going to stick with that, active citizenry, because for a very long time, I think 94 till probably around 2008. I mean, we had a very active civil society. Elections happened, politicians were put into positions, but citizens still participated in the democratic process, not just by putting an X, but also by protesting, petitions, bringing issues forward, and putting pressure on government to implement certain policies, and I think that that's something that we've lost, the democratic process has almost become every, 2 years going to the ballot and putting an X, and then saying that, the country will turn around, and as you said, coming and then just complaining when things aren't going right. And I think that that if we as South Africans decided to get more involved in it, doesn't even need to be broadly, just in issues that you're passionate about, you know. If crime is a huge issue for you, you know, that you're passionate about, join or start a neighborhood watch, you know. They do make a difference, you know. If food insecurity is a big issue for you, you know, there are so many projects that need volunteers, that need resources, you know. For me, it's about saying, how do we create the world that we want to see, because we all have a vision that we have for South Africa, you know. But I think we've become so focused on how others, in the form of politicians, are going to make that difference. Citizens have almost removed themselves from that role and taking on that responsibility. So for me, it's just about getting involved, you know, because there is only a certain amount that government can do. I think in general, government's also underperforming, but yeah, we as just average citizens need to be involved in making the country a better place.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So just before we go, tell the people where they can find you. What are you up to?
Hey, you know, lockdown. I'm always at Menlyn, Maine. If anyone wants to find me, there's a small coffee shop, Mira. I'm there all the time. If you follow me on Instagram, you will see that's my watering hole. Also on Facebook, Kwena Moloto, Instagram, Kwena_94. But I don't know how long I'll be there. You know, I might disappear in 2 to 3 weeks. Don't take it personally. But yeah, still in council. That's my main focus right now. Still focused on institutions of higher learning, and as I said, I'm gonna be there until May next year, and then we'll see.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for speaking to me, and thank you for listening. Thank you, everybody.
Panel governments.
Panel government.